Good morning, you're watching KCRC. My name is David. Thanks for stopping by today. You join me at the park. Not ideal weather conditions, a bit cloudy, overcast, and the grass is soaking wet, but I wanted to come out and make a video. Today I'm going to be talking about Tamiya Beetles. So if you're interested in the Sand Scorcher, the Monster Beetle, or the Blitzer Beetle, stick around, stay tuned, and I'll tell you what I think. So, starting from left to right, we have the Sand Scorcher on the SRB chassis from 1979, Tamiya old school, iconic Tamiya. Everybody knows this one. In the middle, we have the 1986 Tamiya Monster Beetle on the ORV chassis. And then on the right, we have the Tamiya Blitzer Beetle from 1993 on, I believe it's the Falcon chassis. I'm not sure if it's got a proper name. This chassis, as far as I'm aware, was first used on the Falcon. 3 Beetles, but underneath 3 very, very different cars. And incidentally, although the bodies do look the same, there are actually some subtle differences between the 3 that you might not notice until you've built all 3. So I'll start with the Sand Scorcher first, Tamiya's icon from 1979. The Sand Scorcher is, you've got to build one to kind of appreciate it, but the best way I think you can describe the Sand Scorcher is it's a drivable scale model. That's the sense you get from it. More so than any of the others, it seems more like a scale model. It's almost entirely metal. There's a few plastic pieces on it, but for the most part, it's metal. You've got a single flat FRP chassis onto which everything bolts. Very basic gearbox with a kind of unusual design. For example, the motor is not actually screwed into the gearbox. It's basically sandwiched into the gearbox and held in place by little pin taps. So it's actually nothing screws into the motor to hold it in position. Rear is a torsion bar setup suspension with, I believe this was the first Tamiya buggy to have oil dampers, but the dampers are very basic design. The front, you've got, I want to say torsion bar, but I don't believe that's correct term. It's more like a spring, but not a coil spring, kind of wound spring with trailing arm suspension, and again very simple dampers at the front. Everybody says the dampers leak. I've been fortunate in that both my Sand Scorcher and Fighting Buggy haven't leaked yet, but I've not really pushed them much. You know, if you watch any of my videos, you've seen them jumping small jumps, but I've not really pushed them much, so hopefully they're going to stay like that, but I'm expecting them to start leaking at some point. Yeah, the Tamiya Sand Scorcher is totally old school. Really enjoyable build. It's the most, out of the 3 kits, this is by far the most expensive, but it kind of justifies it in the fact that almost everything is metal, and you really do get a sense of quality when you build this kit. I mean, that's not to say the other Tamiya kits are poor quality. It's just the materials used, mostly plastic compared to mostly metal. You do just get more of a sense of quality from the older Tamiya kits, Fighting Buggy, Super Champ, Sand Scorcher, etc. It's a really old school design though, so it's not going to win any races. The steering is less than ideal. The suspension is not that great. There's a hell of a lot of chassis flex, which you don't notice when you're driving. It's got a sealed electronics box, and the gearbox is, I want to say sealed, because you've got plastic cases that go over the pinion and spur, and you've also got another plastic case that goes over the end of the motor. And I want to say that it's all sealed, but the truth of the matter is, I've run this Sand Scorcher about half a dozen times now, and I get way more dirt, sand, debris in the gearbox and pinion and spur of this than any other buggy that I use. And I was scratching my head trying to work out what I'd done wrong, and I downloaded the original Sand Scorcher manual, and I noticed there's a couple of big differences. On the original one, Tamiya had you use a sealant around the cases when you put it together, the electronics box, the pinion and spur cover and the motor cover, and they had you all seal it up with a sealant. It's kind of like a silicone sealant, and of course once you do that, yeah, you're not really going to have any sand, dirt or anything enter the gearbox. But for whatever reason, the re-release doesn't have that step. It's completely removed. I guess Tamiya no longer make the sealant, or they don't feel it's necessary. But I can tell you from running it in dusty conditions, if you watch a couple of my most recent videos, you'll understand, yeah, you need something as a kind of stopgap. I've done what I usually do on my cars when I'm putting gearboxes together. I run a bead of grease around the edges to act as kind of a seal, a kind of gasket in a way to kind of trap dust before it enters the gearbox. Now, I did a similar thing when I built the Sand Scorcher, but I've gone back and I've put a liberal amount of grease between the gear covers, and hopefully that's going to stop the majority of dirt entering the gears. So that's the Sand Scorcher. It's a lovely buggy, highly recommended. In the middle is the Monster Beetle from 1986. This was one of my first RC cars back in the day. I got it, I believe it was a birthday present. It was my first ever new in-box kit that I built up, and I ran the wheels off that thing. I don't know what happened to it, but I ran the wheels off it. Much like the Lunchbox, it's not going to win any races, but it is just such a laugh to run. There's so much enjoyment, so many smiles per mile, as it were. You can't go far wrong with a Monster Beetle, Blackfoot, Lunchbox, or any of those. You've got the ORV chassis with the oversized wheels and tires, the Beetle body. It's a great all-round monster truck, buggy, if you get it in frog form, buggy. It does have a few weaknesses. The suspension, well, you do get coilovers on the Monster Beetle, oil-filled coilovers, compared to like the suspension you have on the Frog. It's not much better, to be honest. The suspension is not that great. It does its job, but it's not that great. Another common problem with the gearbox is they tend to mash the gears up, so they're not really suited to, you know, brushless or high turn motors, well, low turn motors. But nevertheless, they're a great buggy. They're a good laugh. It has a lot of nostalgia value for me. And then on the right we have the Blitzer Beetle from 1993. I was just kind of drifting away from the hobby when this came out, so I have no direct experience back in the day. I picked one up last year on a recommendation from my brother. It's a Falcon chassis with a Beetle body thrown on top. Mostly plastic, simple design. I can't say enough good things about it. It's just a hoot to drive. So as to which one I recommend, well, they're all fantastic buggies. You can't go wrong with any of them. Highly recommended. The Sand Scorcher is the most expensive, the Monster Beetle is the cheapest, and the Blitzer Beetle is slightly, at least over here in Japan, slightly more expensive than the Monster Beetle. Value for money, the Monster Beetle wins hands down. The Sand Scorcher being more expensive, you know, it's mostly metal, so you can justify the cost, I suppose. In terms of drivability, usability, well, the Blitzer Beetle is tough to beat. It is just such a laugh. But it depends where you race. None of these are really ideally suited to circuit, and definitely not a modern day circuit. You're going to break a lot of parts, I think, if you try and use it on a modern day circuit. But for an environment such as this, I would go with the Monster Beetle, simply because the better ground clearance, the bigger tires, just gives you more options of where you can run. Over in Japan, where we are now, the weeds can get pretty tall very quickly, and so smaller buggies with small tires, they tend to struggle in the longer grass and weeds, whereas a Monster Beetle has got an advantage in that sense. So Monster Beetle wins in the fact that you can run it more places, but the Blitzer Beetle is by far the most, well, if you're a hoonigan, then this is definitely the car to choose. The Sand Scorcher, in my opinion, looks the best. It's got this air of scale model about it, and it just looks fantastic. So yeah, for running, Monster Beetle. But again, like I said before, it sounds cop-out, but they're all fantastic, and you can't go wrong with any of them. Build enjoyment, Sand Scorcher wins hands down. That thing is just a joy to build, and if you've come from a background of predominantly more modern Tamiyas, you know, post 1984, 85, you're used to just building plastic Tamiyas, with a few rare exceptions, and so the Sand Scorcher is just such a refreshing change, and it's just an eye-opener about the early days of RC and what Tamiya was doing back then. So build enjoyment, yes, definitely the Sand Scorcher wins. Incidentally, I would mention here that although the bodies look identical, there is actually subtle differences, most notably on the front fascia nose cone. So as you look at the Sand Scorcher, you can see it has indicator lights. So the front fascia has holes pre-drilled for the indicators to fit in. The Monster Beetle does not. However, the Monster Beetle has mounting hoops for the front light buckets, fog lamps. The Blitzer Beetle at first glance looks like a hybrid between the two. It doesn't have the holes for the indicators, and it doesn't have the mounting points for the lights, but it has another difference that it doesn't become apparent until you try and use a Sand Scorcher or Monster Beetle fascia on a Blitzer Beetle chassis. Speaking from experience here, it's very subtle, but in order to clear the front bulkhead and suspension mounting, the nose cone, the front fascia of the Blitzer Beetle is actually longer to clear. So if you look sideways on, you can see there is a depth difference between how far back the lights are set on the Sand Scorcher, the Monster Beetle and the Blitzer Beetle. So just be aware of that. Next, suitability for modern electronics. That's an easy one. Straight away, Blitzer Beetle. Blitzer Beetle will easily accept modern day stick packs, lipos. You can pretty much drop anything in there. It's a bathtub chassis. If it won't fit, minor modifications, it will fit. The Monster Beetle is somewhat different. It's the old school design, so you may have problems trying to fit larger packs in. I know that you can do some mods. If you watch KCRC, he's got a video where he demos how to kind of put some spacers on the battery mounting plate, so you've got a little bit more space. My stick packs fit in, the wires are kind of crushed up right against the plastic, so it's not ideal. The worst of the bunch by far is the Sand Scorcher. It uses a plastic electronics box, and back in the day, I believe it was designed to house one of Tamiya's old style humpback NiCad battery packs. For whatever reason, Tamiya re-engineered it, and they want you to fit their 6.6 volt Lifey mini-size battery packs, M-size, which is basically, the M-size battery pack is almost exactly half the size of a standard 7.2 nickel metal hydride stick pack. You cannot, where Tamiya want you to mount the battery, you cannot put a stick pack in. It just will not fit without modifications. I've seen some people manage to squeeze them in diagonally in the chassis. I've seen other people relocate the steering servo to get them in. Yeah, a lipo, if you run lipo, and most people nowadays tend to do so, then you won't have a problem. But if you're like me and you're sticking with the old school nickel metal hydride stick packs, then it becomes a bit of an issue. I bit the bullet and actually got a Lifey battery pack, more out of curiosity than anything else. I just wanted to see what they're like and what kind of runtime I would get from them. And I have to be honest, this is not going to be a battery review, and I'm sorry for digressing, but you'd be surprised. I use 3600 milliamp nickel metal hydride batteries in all my buggies. And in the Sand Scorcher, we've got a 1100 milliamp hour 6.6 volt Lifey battery. So you would expect it to be considerably slower and runtime to be considerably shorter, but I find neither of those to be true. I think I should talk briefly about what it's like to drive them. It's one thing to watch reviews and see pictures. What is it actually like to drive the three buggies? Well, as you can imagine, they're not high performance machines by any stretch of the imagination. They are, well, they're vintage, aren't they? So if you're looking for something that's a real track weapon, look elsewhere. But there are, although they're not, high performance machines, they're still enjoyable to drive, and each one is very unique. I would say, and this is surprising even to me, the fastest out of the bunch is the Sand Scorcher, and I know it's hard to believe. The Sand Scorcher is running the high gearing, so in the kit you get two sets of pinions and spurs. I'm running the high gearing. All three buggies are using the stock silver can Mabuchi 540. Everything is stock on them. There's same speed controller in all three, but nevertheless, I would say I don't have specialist timing gear or measurement equipment, but running them back to back, I would say the top speed, the Sand Scorcher edges out the other two. Acceleration, that probably goes to the Blitzer. Certainly handling, stability, cornering, Blitzer wins hands down. The Sand Scorcher doesn't have a diff, and it tends to suffer from snap oversteer, particularly if you let off the throttle in mid-corner. So it wants to roll, and it wants to roll a lot, especially with the tires that I've got on it at the moment. The Blitzer Beetle is very stable. I don't think I rolled it yet. I tell a lie, I rolled it once, but it's much more stable. It's certainly the most the car you can throw around the most. The Monster Beetle, just due to the fact that it's got high center of gravity, it wants to roll, but it's not as bad as the Sand Scorcher. The Blitzer Beetle has the best steering, but the Sand Scorcher is pretty good given its age and design. The Monster Beetle, the steering is vague, it wobbles and wanders around, but it's part of the fun and enjoyment. Jumping, the Blitz Beetle is most suited for any kind of jumping. The Monster Beetle can handle it as well, but it tends to bounce around a lot on landings. Sand Scorcher, I kind of baby it, but it can take small jumps. I wouldn't do anything too extreme on it. You're just liable to break things. As to which one is the most enjoyable to drive, well, it's all subjective. They're all great fun. For me, the Monster Beetle has a lot of nostalgia value, but if I'm truly honest, the Blitzer Beetle is, out of the three, the most fun to drive, because you don't have to be as careful with it. It handles better, and you can just, throw it around, and it seems to handle everything you throw at it. So definitely the Blitzer Beetle is the one. If you just want something like a park basher, I hesitate to use the word basher because I'm not the type of person who likes to bash my models. But yeah, if you want to drive it enthusiastically, as it were, then the Blitzer Beetle is probably the one to choose. So that's my review of the Tamiya Beetle body chassis buggies. Tamiya also do a Volkswagen Beetle rally car, which is a slightly different body. But these are the three that use the same plastic hard body. There is, of course, one more Beetle that I hope to feature on my channel in the near future. Not a Tamiya though, it's the Scorcher Beetle, which, as I'm filming, is under construction. Hopefully I'll have it done in the next couple of weeks. Once it's done, of course, I will bring all four Beetles, John, Paul, George and Ringo, to the park and hopefully shoot a running video and then give you my thoughts on the four Beetles. But stay tuned for that. Well, those are my thoughts on the Tamiya Beetles. They're all fantastic and you can't go wrong with any of them. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I apologize if it's too long, and I tend to, once you get me started on talking about RC, I don't tend to stop. So people tell me I waffle on too much, so apologies. I'm sure most people turned off by now anyway. But anyway, thanks for watching. My name is David. This is KCRC. I'll see you in the next one.